club. He has, however, dismissed claims accusing him of extreme malice, such as setting fire to the former drummer for the Fall, Carl Burns, while Burns was a session drummer for Pill. These, man, story after story. Hey, everybody out there. Welcome back to another Friday installment here at the Audiophiles. It's Andy's John, and it's time to dig into a song that was recommended by one of you fine people out there in the listening audience. And the song that was offered up is one that I think you had heard of this song, but you hadn't yet to listen to it. Is that correct? And I
Yes.
know you were kind of champing at the bit to check it out. So, as circumstances would be, we wanted to take that into consideration and give this one up to John to listen to. I also had the chance of listening to it off screen, unlike John, and was able to take some notes on this. And so, we're going to be doing the song Time. It is a cover, as you probably know, and it is performed by Jah Wobble and Jon Klein. And it was offered up to us by Glenn on our Grinderman Mickey Mouse and the Goodbye Man video. So, John, you are going to run off and give this thing a listen, and I'm going to come back and kind of really focus more on the wobble side of things. I think the whole reason one, this gentleman has come up, and the legend of him has come up in some of our past videos. So I think we're going to tackle a bit of the story behind the man and how this song came to be. So please, John, go off and give it a listen and come back and let us all know what you think.
Will do. So that was the quite famous sort of intro to Time that don't sped right up for the TikTok generation. That's quite funny. Yeah, it's very different. Whiz bang. Interesting. It's really interesting. So you've got quite thick guitars there. There's a chuggy one and an expressive one, and they're kind of following the vocal melody like pack of dogs. And the vocals themselves are interesting. So there's two vocal lines. The one of them being the sort of Sprechgesang style, I guess we call it, of Mr. Wobble. I recognise that. I don't know if the other one is him. Again, sort of singing a slightly, or if it's Mr. Klein. I've never heard him sing. I've only heard him play guitar. But so that's interesting. So you've got this double edge to it, which is slightly odd. When they're sort of progressing through it, you get a kind of half-assed version of those incredible backing singers throughout the whole album on the original. And yeah, it's really the difference there is really different. You can feel it's yeah, interesting. And then the guitar tone just did a one little lick that sounded like the down, which then goes into the solo, which is a great solo on the original. Let's see how they approach it on here. It's got a lot of energy and drive, and I see where they're going from it. It's decent. Don't get me wrong. I'm not hating it. It's just that it just makes every time I hear it, it makes me realize how much I like the original. So, and it means quite a lot to me as well. I kind of never really accept that until I hear it again, and then oh yeah, it's just interesting. Right, let's just go back a wee bit. I think the guitar's coming out. Okay. So yeah, interesting, decent. I mean, it's just one of the great guitar solos. I mean, there's so many Pink Floyd, isn't there? But it is a fantastic, and you kind of. I mean, I know note for note. To hear it, I could play. I can play it, obviously, but I don't know. There's tens of thousands of people who can play it. You know, just quite knowing it. So yeah, it's great. It was really the interesting thing was again you had this second, almost like a second voice thing. There was stuff going on, sometimes mimicking it, sometimes just slightly countering it. Particularly, I noticed in the right channel, I think there's a real mix going on of other sounds coming in, which gives it that busy, energetic feel. The one thing I will say, which is quite surprising, is for a Jah Wobble track, that the bass is really functional. It's almost like it's just a second hand. You know, and that rhythm section in particular is just this like it's like someone jogging. In fact, it's like a C-list celebrity jogging at a fun run. Yeah, you know, it's doing something, but you're not really that interested. Which is quite surprising because Roger Walters, based on this, had so much. The original. Stop talking about the original. It's not fair. But they chose to cover it, so yeah, why not? Yeah, interesting.
Racing around to come up behind you again. The sun is the same in a relative way, but you're older. Sure of breath, and one day closer to death. Every year is getting shorter, never seem to find the time. Plans that neither come to naught. Half a page of scribbled lines, hanging on in quiet desperation. Is
Interesting. So I've taken all the energy out of it. To this, that's a real sort of contemplative part of the original song, and it's lost so much. It is. It sounds kind of plasticky. It's just lost all the stuff that was going on and driving it. There was that nervous energy, and it's just whipped away. And what's left behind isn't the core of it isn't appealing to me. I mean, it's not terrible. Don't get me wrong. It's just it doesn't have that. Hard to explain, but yeah, hopefully you know what I mean. Interesting.
And when I come home cold and tired, it's good to warm my bones beside the fire.
What's my bass now?
Far away across the field, the towing on with eyes blood. Close the faithful journeys, hear the softly spoken magic spells.
Yeah, that last 15, 20 seconds just sounded clumsy. I didn't enjoy that. I guess as a cover, it has its place. The thing is, it's such a great song that, any version of it will sound half decent. I think if you've never heard the original, then you have the advantage here. This will have a certain sort of lure for certain people, I guess, particularly with the energy and the start of it. I think it's just going up against really, really big song. Doing a cover of it is tough because it has all that emotional depth, the pathos, almost an existential sort of wariness to it. And this is like a frisbee, and it has its place. Don't get me wrong, but I know what I will be listening to tonight. Yep, the Tic Tics. No, I'm joking. Right, so let's find out how this came about, why they decided to do this. I know a man will have the answers. Failing that, we'll talk to Andy.
All right, so you're back. Where did this fall for you? I know that you've got some favorite cover versions out there of certain songs that rank pretty high up there. How did this one fall on that scale? Was it well received, or did you not dig it?
Curiouser and curiouser, said Alice. So starts off with what appears to be quite easily the music to a very naff sci-fi TV program. When I realised that it's the actual speeded up almost effort, like a TikTok version of the intro to the original song. And actually, when you realise how they did quite a good job of doing it, it just sounds ridiculous at the first, when you know the original song. And I will be referring to the original song quite a bit in my sort of. But anyway, so this has all these bleak chords that kind of rise up with almost like questioning faces. They've got that tone to them over a sort of pounding race to the city hall beat, and then some tiki-taka percussion, which is all short passes in the center circle. So yeah, it's quite interesting. And then we get a couple of flag waving beats that herald the arrival of the vocals. So if we just go back a bit to the original, the intro, I think, is one of the great intros of modern music. It's amazing. And they were very wise not to try and copy that. Very wise, because it's just that. So it was really, but what they've done is they packed it in, and if you want to say it's a TikTok version, it's condensed down. It's full from the off of energy and drive, so we got a different vibe. But fair enough. So then we get the vocals coming in. So they're double tracked. Now, one of them, to me, is recognizable as the sort of Sprechersang of voice of Mr. Wobble, top geezer and all that, added geezer quotient. The second voice, I'm not sure. It may be him singing, So it's like a higher register, or it might be Mr. Klein, I don't know. But it adds a little something. It's this weird sort of I mean, you have this all the way through the song actually. It's almost like, I know the two of them are combining, but it's almost like this double voice all the way through with music, and the music as with instruments as well as the vocals, which has this sort of offsetting strangeness to it. The guitars that come in there and they follow the vocal melody like a pack of dogs must be Mr. Klein's work. I only know him from Susan the Banshees that we did recently. But he's decent, very decent guitarist, and sounds great. So you've got a couple of guitars in there at least. There's one that's the chugger. It's all chunky and brash like a staffy. And then there's this other one that kind of does this embellishing, throwing out little motifs at the end of the lines, like a loquacious husky. The rhythm section does a really good impersonation of footage of a C-list celebrity jogging in a charity fun run. I mean, they're moving, but it's not moving to watch or listen to. It's functional. And what it does is inject pace and energy to this track. You get some little mini runs from the bass, but I mean, I was really surprised that it was fairly sort of almost like a second hand a lot of the time, the bass. There wasn't a lot to it for Mr. Wobble's talents and unique sort of take on that instrument. I was really surprised how sort of vanilla the bass was, unless I missed huge swathes of it, which could have possibly happened. But but it does set this pace of this energy. When we get to the section where it sings "Tired of Lining in the Sunshine, Staying at Home to Watch the Rain," that's when the kind of limitations of this cover version really sink in. And just to explain, I was saying it's unfair to refer to the original, but they chose to cover it, so sort of. I wasn't really that much of a Pink Floyd fan growing up. I remember the excitement of Another Brick in the Wall, Part 2, being, would you believe it, the Christmas #1 single in the UK in 1979. It was so odd, but it was anthemic for us. I mean, I was 9 years old to sing that at school. We don't need no education. I mean, it's just great. And I also had a battered old copy of Relics, which was like got stuff from their first 2 or 3 albums, which I loved as well. But that was about it. And then I went to college, and when I used to come home from college, driving home, I would have an ever-present cassette in my car, a battered TDK C90. On one side, I would have taped from the vinyl this bad boy, Concert by The Cure, which I absolutely adore, just because I've listened to it like a couple of 100 times. And on the other side would be this. Even now, if you ask me, I wouldn't say that Dark Side of the Moon is my favorite Pink Floyd album until I put it on and listen to it. Especially late at night, driving alone, it holds a real special magic. And yeah, it's just as you get into it, it's all enveloping. It's a fantastic album. There's a reason why it sold so many bloody copies and whatever. And it has all this special quality to it and magic. And the guys were so young when they did it as well. It's unbelievable. The sort of existential quality to it. So, however fun this version is, it totally lacks any of that depth, which is fine as long as you sort of buy into that. So yeah, going back to it. So at the Tide of Lying part, we do get a half-assed version of those wonderful backing vocals from the original. They're sort of there, but they're quite faint. And they don't really feel like, it's not like the original where they really start going for it and vocalizing. It flicks into the guitar solo. Now, there's a bit when they're doing that where you get like a riff which sounds almost exactly the same as the original guitar solo. There's that and then it goes into it. And this version is pretty much note for note. It's a good version of the solo. It's decent. I thought what was really interesting was you had these accompanying parts which were kind of sometimes echoing, sometimes sort of countering, definitely going on the right channel. Just little bits of extra guitar work, and it just made it interesting and made it sort of skew a little bit. So there's little touches there that were quite interesting. But as I said, the amazing thing for me for a Jah Wobble track was the lack of impact from the bass.
Yeah.
I mean, when you come out of that song in the original, you get into this. Roger does a great job of putting in some swing and some groove into the song. That you know what I mean. Anyway, I just didn't have that, which is really strange. And then the last minute, where it slows down and it goes that home again sort of section, it really does magnify the limitations of this because they strip it out and you don't have that drive and that energy anymore. And it just sounds, if I'm being horrible, a bit plasticky. It just wasn't there. And the last 20 seconds where he does this far away across the field is the worst part. It sounds really awkward and doesn't work. There's no soul to this, or no pathos, or existential weariness, or whatever you want to say to it. You know, how you feel at the end of this song.
Yeah.
Which is fine. For this version, it feels like this version is done as a modernizing, or which again I understand totally. It feels like this would be played as a soundtrack in a pseudo punk cocktail bar. I enjoyed it as far as it went. The thing is, it's a great fucking song, so it's really hard to screw it up, I think. And they did a fairly straight version of it with their own touches. But the issue is the depth of the original. It really has an impact when you listen to it. It definitely is part of the whole album as well. Whereas this is the equivalent of a frisbee being thrown. It's fun, but it has that much depth as well. So yeah, I definitely didn't hate this at all. I was quite surprised by it. It feels strange, to be honest with you. It was not what I expected at all for Mr. Wobble or Mr. Klein. So yeah, it was odd. I didn't dislike it. I liked some of their approach and attack to it. I don't think it was successful as an exercise as a cover version. You have to wonder why they did it, because this is a really tough song to cover and make your own. The All-Star Reggae guys obviously did a version which I've heard, which is absolutely fantastic. But they vary because it's a different genre. You've got a lot more scope to play with.
Yeah,
it works really
That's
well.
one of the things I was going to jump in and say when you handed it over to me was the genre that they're trying to fit this into is very limiting. And that's to take nothing away from punk music. But I mean, even that the lack of interesting bass work boils down to the fact that they rewrote this in a straight punk fashion, where there's not a lot of room for some crazy, cool, different bass stuff going on there. With all due respect to most of punk's bassists, it is what it is. That DIY, simple, keep it simple, stupid mentality doesn't afford you the extravagance of thinking outside the box a lot of times.
This isn't even, well, I would say it's a variant of it. Like we've talked in recent episodes about steampunk, this sort of Victoriana version of punk, and this feels like a Wall Street punk.
Oh yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it feels like it's that sort of type of thing, and I don't mean to denigrate it at all because it does a job. But so yeah, it was interesting. I'm glad I heard it, listened to it, but I didn't go a bundle over it.
I smiled the whole way through. I mean, I enjoyed it, and the thing that you said also, like the word that you described, is fun. It was fun. It was a fun version of a song that no one's ever going to top the original version of. You know what I mean? And I'm sure Wobble and Klein knew that when they went into the studio and did this. They weren't trying to one up Pink Floyd and one of the maybe top, depending on who you are, 5 to 15 best rock songs ever written, or at least on one of those albums that features a couple of them. They knew what they were working with. They knew the source material, and they knew they weren't going to, take it to another level. They were just going to look at it through a different lens. And I try to remind myself of that when I feel like I'm being too critical of it, because you know what I mean? So I agree with everything you said. You're absolutely right. But it didn't take away from my enjoyment. It sounds like obviously it didn't take away from your enjoyment of it either. It's just, It was a hill. It was a mountain that it clearly wasn't going to, surpass when it came to the original. So I totally agree. Um, so let's get into Mr. Wobble a little bit here. John Joseph Wardle, born August 11th, 1958, better known by the stage name Jah Wobble, is an English bass guitarist, pardon me, and singer. He became known to a wider audience as the original bass player in Public Image Limited, which we've covered on the channel, and you've schooled me up on quite a bit, in the late 70s and the early 80s. And he left the band after only 2 albums. Following his departure from Pill, he developed a solo career. In 2012, he reunited with fellow Pill guitarist Keith Levine for Metal Box in dub and the album Yin and Yang. And since 2013, he has been one of the featured pundits on Sunday morning's virtual jukebox segment of BBC Radio 5 Live's Up All Night with Doton Adebayo. Is that a correct pronunciation? Sounds good.
It's a pronunciation.
His autobiography, Memoirs of a Geezer, was published in 2009. Wobble grew up with his family in Whitechapel's Clichy estate in London's East End. He is a longtime friend of John Lydon, obviously, whom he had met in the 1970s at London's Kingsway College. The two formed half of the group of the friends known as the Four Johns, along with John Gray and John Simon Ritchie, later known as Sid Vicious. Jah Wobble acquired his stage name through the drunken mumbled version of Wardle's name by Sid Vicious, which Wobble kept because people would never forget it. In his early life and career, by his own admission, Wardle was given to occasional bouts of aggressions exacerbated by heavy drinking and drug use. And as a result, he ended up living in a squat with John Gray in West London while Lydon formed the Sex Pistols. With admittedly large builder's hands, and I totally can understand this. I loved this reading about him because it was one of the things I was like, yeah, Branch, you're going to be a bass player. Because he says, with admittedly large builder's hands, he had experimented with the guitar, but found playing bass to be more connected and whole body experience, influenced in part by admiring Bob Marley and the Wailers bassist Aston Family Man Barrett on stage in 1975. So yeah, chord creation, intricacies therein can be quite difficult when you got big, sausage hands. So could totally empathize with the man, and probably a pretty damn good bass player to want to emulate and look up to in your
yeah, definitely.
So Wardle was critical of his friend's vicious bass playing as John
Everybody was.
Wardle was as critical of his friend's vicious bass playing as John Lydon, and had hence played in the experimentation sessions with Lydon. After he burned the furniture of his squat mates in order to stay warm, they left him alone there with a mattress, a headboard, and his Music Man copy bass. This guy is a trip, man. Following the Sex Pistols breakup, Lydon approached Wobble about forming a band. Both had similarly broad musical tastes and were avid fans of reggae and world music. Wobble has stated that the first Pill album was recorded so quickly due in part to the bassist's altercations with a sound engineer and met at a nearby club. He has, however, dismissed claims accusing him of extreme malice, such as setting fire to the former drummer for the Fall, Carl Burns, while Burns was a session drummer for Pill. Story after story, I'm like remembering all the stuff that you were telling me about him when we covered Pill the first time. Wobble co-wrote and contributed bass and drums to Pill's second album, Metal Box, which was released in 1979. He grew increasingly frustrated with the lackluster creative atmosphere in the band, which he felt stifled his artistic ambitions and Pill's creative potential. Besides differences in our artistic vision, further conflicts were brought on in part due to his heavy drug and alcohol abuse. Wobble then recorded his debut album, The Legend Lives On, Jah Wobble, in Betrayal, making unauthorized use of material from Metal Box, for which he was summarily fired from PIL in late 1980. Wobble also released at least one single during his period as a member of Pill. his 1978 single Dreadlock Don't Deal in Wedlock, in which he recites Edward Lear's The Owl and the Pussycat, and finishes with the line, "Love and marriage is like ice cream and cabbage. Dreadlock don't deal in wedlock." Those are sage words. Soon after Pill, Wobble formed The Human Condition with guitarist Dave Animal Maltby and Pill's original drummer Jim Walker. The post-Pill years saw Wobble also collaborating with Can members Holger Chakai and Jackie Liebezeit on Chakai's solo projects. In 1983, Wardle appeared on the LP Snake Charmer, billed as a co-leader alongside guitarist The Edge of U2, Chakai, Liebezeit, and producer Francois Kevorkian. Jah Wobble's Invaders of the Heart was formed in 1982, but the project eventually stagnated. By 1985, Jah Wobble's heavy drinking and drunken brawls were having an effect on his life. Halfway through the recording of the album Psalms, October 1986, Wobble stopped drinking. From then through the present day, he remains clean and sober. In 1987, due to repeated prompting of his friend and former bandmate percussionist Neville Murray, Wobble reformed the Invaders of the Heart with a whole new lineup and released a live album, Without Judgment, with the band in '89. Following the relative success of Without Judgment, Wobble has collaborated with many musicians, Brian Eno among them, and his explorations into world music predated much of the genre's popularity. Wobble hit his commercial peak in '91's Rising Above Bedlam. While the album did not chart, it spawned 4 singles. Although he has released recordings since the late '70s, Wobble has been particularly prolific from the mid-'90s to the present. He now runs his own label, 30 Hertz Records, and tours regularly throughout the UK and Europe with his current band, Jah Wobble and the Invaders of the Heart. His music has spanned a number of genres, including ambient music, dance music, and in 2003 reworkings of traditional English folk songs. Wobbles was part of the industrial music supergroup The Damage Manual, which formed in 2000 and consisted of Wobble on bass alongside former Pill and Killing Joke drummer Martin Atkins, Killing Joke guitarist Geordie Walker, and vocalist Chris Conley. A collaboration with his wife, Chinese-born Gunsang player Zi Lan Lao, was entitled Chinese Dub. In September 2009, John Lydon reformed Pill for a series of concerts in late 2009, which I'm sure we discussed on our Pill episode. Despite Lydon's invitation to join, Wobble did not feature in the lineup since he considered the wages offered insufficient and disagreed with the choices of venues. This guy is so mercurial and prickly and interesting. In 2011, Wobble collaborated with Julie Campbell, alias Warp Records artist Lone Lady, in a project called Psychic Life. The debut album, Psychic Life, was inspired by disco post-punk and psychogeography and was released by Cherry Red Records on November 14th, 2011. That sounds really, really interesting. Since his departure from Pill, he would go on to release a total of 36 albums. His most recent was Timeless Roots, released in 2024. On May 3rd, 2024, Cleopatra Records released a tribute album to Pink Floyd entitled Punk Floyd, a tribute to Pink Floyd, which features performances by some of the most widely recognized and heralded veterans of the punk rock movement, like Fear, The Vibrators, UK Subs, Dead Boys, Skids, Anti-Nowhere League, The Members, and you guessed it, This Cover of Time by Jah Wobble and Jon Klein. The album is described as punk meets prog on a supercharged tribute album where legendary punk rock bands add a heavy dose of attitude, authority, and anarchy to beloved Pink Floyd songs. I think authority is an interesting choice of words when describing punk, but go on.
So, a rather famous story. The first time that Malcolm McLaren met John Lydon, Johnny Rotten, he was running his shop, Sex, down in London on King's Road or wherever it was. And Lydon turns up and he has a Pink Floyd t-shirt on. which he then wrote in marker pen over the top, "I hate." And he had green teeth, which is why they called him Johnny Rotten. So yeah, the idea of punk bands covering Pink Floyd is just weird.
Yeah.
It really is.
It is. Over at Thoughts Words Actions, they reviewed the album and had this to say of the Wobble Klein cover. Time by Jah Wobble and Jon Klein retains the atmospheric essence of Pink Floyd's classic, but introduces a hypnotic bass line and minimalist guitar work. I would have actually flipped those two descriptors. This track stands out for its ability to balance respect for the source material with innovative sonic explorations, making it one of the album's highlights. So if that's their opinion on this track, maybe it'll educate whether or not you check out the rest of the album. And over at Real Gone Rocks, they wrote this about the cover. Another very interesting cover. Jah Wobble and Jon Klein have rebuilt Time from the ground up, opening with a chaotic drum part and an almost danceable rhythm. The track wastes no time in advertising its differences. Moving into the body of the song, a pulsing bass underscores a chopping guitar in a way that carries the busy melody forth, leaving the vocal not only find its own space, but also convey a very familiar melody. Considering how naturally the Dark Side of the Moon classic flows, it's amazing how well this works. And the fact that Gilmour's overly familiar solo is replayed pretty much verbatim, giving a much stronger link to the past, makes this all that much more impressive. So there's one person's thoughts on it. Let's dig into these lyrics I'm sure we're very familiar with. Ticking away the moments that make up a dull day, you fritter and waste the hours in an offhand way, kicking around on a piece of ground in your hometown, waiting for someone or something to show you the way. Tired of lying in the sunshine, staying home to watch the rain. You are young and life is long, and there is time to kill today. And then one day you find 10 years have got behind you. No one told you where to run, you missed the starting gun. And you run to catch up with the sun, but it's sinking. The racing around to come up behind you again. The sun is the same in a relative way, but you're older, shorter of breath, and one day closer to death. Every year is getting shorter, never seem to find the time, plans that either come to naught or half a page of scribbled lines. Hanging on in quiet desperation is the English way. The time is gone, the song is over, thought I'd something more to say. Home, home again. I like to be here when I can. When I come home cold and tired, it's good to warm my bones beside the fire. Far away across the field, the tolling of the iron bell calls the faithless to their knees to hear the softly spoken magic spells. So, there you are, and there we are with this cover of a classic by two very interesting individuals, but most importantly, Jah Wobble, who is, I continue to learn doing my homework what an interesting character he truly is. So, but hats off to him for getting sober and staying sober. That shit ain't easy. So, more power to him on getting clean and really, it sounds like that was almost coincided with this second act of music that happened sort of that post 90s period. So, it's never too late for redemption and good on him. And please, good on Glenn for shouting this thing out. This was a pretty fun listen. It's always cool to listen to a song that you're super familiar with and that you have so much respect for, looked at through a different lens, even if it's not going to hold up to the original. That's perfectly fine. So, John, thanks for giving this a listen. Glenn, thanks for giving this a shout. Everybody out there, please let us know what you thought down in the comments field below. Also, please like, share, and subscribe if you'd be so inclined. We really do appreciate it. And hopefully John and I will catch all y'all in growing numbers on the next installment of the Audiophiles. See you later, guys.